introduce us.
Roll a d4.
Oh my god, is this our intro?
Just look, one of us just needs to say, hi, we're HMG, and it's the four of us back together again. You're welcome.
Yeah, that's a fucking Dan intro if I've ever seen it.
Done. There's the cold open. Hey guys, welcome back to HMG Army Rules Reviews. Today we are going over the Soviet Union, which I know Dan's been fucking fanging for. So I'm very excited to get this underway. Just quickly, we'll go over, our feelings on Soviets within bolt action very, very quickly. So you don't need to skip ahead too much to get to the actual meat of the episode. But yeah, Gorchin, do you want to start us off on how you think Soviets play at the moment?
Soviets, how they play at the moment, they are absolutely the biggest 100% set of training wheels you can get on the Allied side of bolt action. You heard it here first as somebody who plays US. If you think US is training wheels, you need to get yourself squared away. Jacob, thoughts?
I've probably played against Soviets more than any other army. I did collect them when Bolt Action version 1 came out as well, just for a little bit. But they're incredibly versatile. There are so many options throughout the Soviet Union, and they have such large squad sizes. And don't discredit that free, inexperienced squad we'll get to when we get to the special rules. They always put in work. You'll see them always taking down tanks. You'll see them they're great objective holders. But they're just that free unit that nobody wants to target. And they always seem to be putting in work. So they're a really impressive army. And they seem to have most of the benefits of most nations. So Gorchins described them as the Allied Germans before. They have a lot of options there. There's a lot of options to have a lot of small arms that are above just basic rifles. You can get Panzerfaust with them. They've got some unique units in there. They've got great artillery. There's nothing not to like about Soviets. And the minis are pretty good as well. Not the original summer infantry, but the winter ones, those are really good sculpts.
Yep. And I think it's the only box that you get 40.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It is a score. And so many tanks. So many tanks. It's not just T-34s, but like there's a good options going through Rubicon and all that kind of stuff. You don't just have to stick to Warlord. There
is a lot of bad tanks as well.
Yeah.
Funky tanks, yeah.
I just really like there's so much support for them both within the official rule set, but also like just model range wise. The best thing about collecting Soviets, and probably the most annoying thing playing against them, is like you don't know unless you've faced it a couple of times before. Like there's always a new trick in the bag, if that makes sense. Like 1 second you're like, oh yeah, T-34s. That's what all Russian players are going to take. Next thing you know, you got a friggin' KV-2 just like roll up on you, and you're like, I didn't plan for this.
I think you don't know what exactly is going to come at you. It very much speaks to the versatility of the army that you can build. And I think one of their national rules really allows you to very much lean into what would be typically a small dice list that has some obvious weaknesses in terms of body count. And then your national rule's like, oh yeah, you just get another free squad. So that's probably a good place to segue into the national rules. Dan, you want to kick us off with the first one, Great Patriotic War?
Yep. So Great Patriotic War, the Soviets are really spoiled for choice on national rules anyway. But the Great Patriotic War, whenever a unit of infantry or artillery models fails a morale check and would be destroyed as a consequence, you take that test again and you apply the second result. The reroll applies to all infantry and artillery units, including HQ units that face the situation. It only applies, however, to infantry and artillery, therefore not to tanks or other vehicles, or if in the future any other type of unit is created, it wouldn't apply to those either.
Yeah.
I cannot understate how important that rule is. It has saved units and squads on objectives and game win potential objectives more times than I can count when playing Soviets. And the pure fact that it's like, so whenever I would take a morale check and would otherwise be destroyed, there's no exceptions to that. So it's any form of morale check. So those flamer hits on me, I don't care. I'm going to reroll. Good luck with that. Yeah. And I can be hit by a flamer and suddenly, I can not die. So it's like if you fluff your flamer attack and force me to take it, and then I just don't disappear, it's like, guess what's happening next turn?
Yeah. I think it seems like a little bit at face value, it doesn't seem that strong. Because, you're taking a morale check, you're already lost half your squad, you've already got pins. But a lot of time, that will either happen from one particular high volume of fire shooting, so you're at 1, maybe 2 pins from something before, or you got whacked by a 2-inch template, so you're sitting on 2 or 3 pins. As we've talked about before, when you get down to about morale 7, and 8, that's when it sort of ticks over 45, 55, depending on which side, percent chance you'll pass the morale check, depending on which side you land on. Now, if you then add in a reroll when you fail it, that becomes now about a 75% chance you'll pass that morale check, give or take. It's not quite as simple, but that means 3/4 of the time when you're going to take morale check, you don't actually fail it, which is a really, really good place to be. And I wonder... this is one of the things that I think I'll bump into a lot as we move through the army is, do you want to take stubborn in this force because you have that? Is it kind of winning more as opposed to losing less? And that's something I struggle with a lot in bolt action. I know a lot of players will lean on lists that do something and they take that to the nth degree and try to do that well and just accept the weaknesses. And a lot of, I think, whether consciously or not, a lot of players in our meta tend to go, I would rather smooth over a weakness in the list and then compound on a strength. And I don't know where exactly I fall in that. I've tried a little bit of both. I have won tournaments with both, so I don't really know where I sit on that. But yeah, stubborn Soviets, I think there's a good case for it, but I think there's also a very good case to not bother because you have the reroll. I'm
interested in this rule in regards to small teams. Like if you've got a 2-man team and you lose one, like a flamethrower, you've charged it forward, it manages to survive because it's veteran, small team, yada yada yada. One goes down. That's like any other force is sitting there going, and they're veterans, so it should be alright. But if you've got a veteran flamethrower and you fail that roll, that's a feel bad moment. Whereas Soviets can be like, well, let's see if I fail a veteran morale test twice. Let's go.
Yeah.
So I've never played like that kind of. I've never had that happen. That use case happen with when I've played them a couple times, but that's kind of what speaks out to me as something that could be like real kind of funky.
Typically those... Sorry, go ahead, Jacob.
No, this rule is really glanced over for the majority of players. Like as I mentioned that I regularly have an opponent who plays Soviets, and he only picked this up in a tournament like 6 months in, and realized that how strong this could potentially be. This is awesome.
I think it speaks to the strength of the entire friggin' book that you look at this and go,
it's that is very much, I think, where it lands, right? So because if you think about fixed weapon assets that are they're all either infantry or artillery teams generally, right? So let's say that I get ranged in on and I lose half a squad, and typically you go, that weapon's gone, like that thing's just gonna pop. Whether it's with Soviets, you're like, I've probably got at least one more turn, and you're like, how is that even an option? Like what?
Yeah, I think it's also because you can pick up a lot of small teams in this book. I think this rule if anything, it kind of makes you want to take more small teams, just because you can, just in case you didn't have enough incentive anyway. So the next national rule is quantity has a quality all of its own. Basically, what it boils down to is you get a free 12-man rifleman squad that is inexperienced, and they get all of the upgrades that you can give that squad.
Anti-tank grenades.
Yeah. I think it usually boils down to an anti-tank grenades. What about banners?
Yeah.
So depending on the selector that you take, then you can take a Soviet flag banner as well for free, which allows you to re-roll your rally tests if you ever fail those, and it's a nice little bonus.
It's free.
It's almost more aesthetic in version 2 than it was. But the thing is, like, as we said in the opening, that squad. It's 12 free models, so even if you're using them just as casualties and soaking up damage, it's 12 models. And because they're green, they don't stay inexperienced necessarily the whole game either. And so the number of times where your opponent goes, I'm just going to shoot one guy off that and just try and trigger their green activation, and then you level up and you go, thanks. And they're just like, what happened? Like,
I think that that green rule is a little cheeky within the rifle squad.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. I didn't realize it was a 12-man.
That is awesome, man.
Yeah, that's.
It's good because you can take a whole bunch of veterans, or you can take a slightly more expensive vehicles, and you're not really losing a squad. In terms of your infantry selector, don't get me wrong, it's, you might get an LMG in there, anti-tank. It's still a 12-man inexperienced rifle squad, so it's not super crash hot. But a lot of the times you're trading something that isn't a key cornerstone in your list for an upgrade or something more powerful. So being able to basically buy a free backfield objective holder, or a flank securer, or sometimes even a body blocker, which is not something that's talked about too much in bolt action. But because of the 1-inch bubble, both in vehicles and infantry and a bunch of other stuff, you can actually just really limit your opponent's movement a fair bit. But we can save that for a tactics video.
This unit in particular really causes some strife for me. It's the same thing as when I'm facing recce units. Do I target it or not?
Yeah.
And it just makes that decision process on the board. It kind of forces my hand, and I really get fuddled up on this one. I've fallen for it for a lot of times, just ignoring it. And then it ends up putting in some work or the other. And then you're wasting shots on a free unit. It's a tough one. It's a really cool option.
I think wasting shots in a free unit might not be the best way of thinking about it. The other way of thinking about it is you are targeting your opponent's national rule, and you don't very often get the opportunity to do that.
I like that way of thinking.
It feels a little bit better.
yeah. Because imagine walking into, obviously you can't do this, but imagine walking into a game being like, okay, let's say it's turn 2, you're halfway through the turn, and be like, okay, if I successfully complete the shooting, you can't use fire maneuver for the rest of the game against your US opponent. Like, imagine if that was on the table. You would be like, oh, okay, I'm definitely taking that shot. And so
it's like, how much do I need to do?
Yeah. And so that's how, obviously it's not a 100% parity comparison. And so I'm obviously not saying that these two things are equivalent, but it's just one way of thinking about it, going, oh, I'm shooting a free unit, might not be the best way of looking at it, going, oh, I am denying you one of your national rules with one of my units, and I don't have to do that for the other 3, 4, 5 turns in the game. I'm going to take that opportunity.
So after that little cope, do you want to move on to the next special rule here, National Army rule?
Not one step back. Basically, you get access to commissars, and commissars have a special ability where if a friendly unit fails an order test, not a morale check, within 6 inches of the commissar, remove a model and reroll the order test. Now, I had to double check the FAQ. I didn't get a chance to do this before that, but I don't think this counts as a casualty because it's remove a model. So you don't. Dan's shaking his head, so that means I was right. It means you don't trigger green and anything that triggers off receiving a casualty or a pin mark or anything like this, because it's not remove a casualty.
Medic can't save him.
Yeah,
it doesn't trigger green. It can't be used to, somehow trigger an ambush to run away or go down. Factors. So first of all, he's a sniper with an auto hit, and so he will just murder somebody. And so it's kind of just like damage, body armor. Don't care.
Well, because there's no hit roll, there's no wound roll. It doesn't even say a model is hit or a model is wounded or it's casualty. It just says remove one model.
Remove.
Interestingly, this means if your small team is down to one man and you try to activate any further morale check, your comms are captured because it's not optional. It explicitly says it's not optional.
This rule does not apply to 1 or 2 models units.
There you go. I might finish reading the rule.
So he doesn't actually cap your medic who tries to run away.
It does, for example, if you have, for some reason, taken an HQ with two officers to assistants with the officer, the commissar's following them up. He does kill one of the assistants and just goes, "Nah, you weren't doing what you were told." And it's like, the officer was right there. I'm fairly sure he had it under control. This is typically because, of course, the benefit for killing off your one of your valiant soldiers, whether they were free or not, is you then get to reroll the order check. Another reroll.
It looks like the Soviets don't like failing morale checks, or when they roll on their leadership or their morale value, they get a reroll. It's pretty much what it comes down to, and I don't think commissars are very expensive.
Normally, you would take them as inexperienced, and that's about 15 points.
Yep.
I'm surprised. This one doesn't seem to come up that much in competitive play, just from what I've seen anyway. And I think that's discuss.
I mean,
go ahead,
15-point order dice.
That's the thing. I don't disagree with you, Tyler. I wonder if it's got less to do with the efficiency or the effectiveness of a commissar, and it's got more to do with the fact that most of our local tournaments cap at sort of 12 or 14 order dice. Because that, as we've talked about before, that very much sort of skews it to a regular/veteran meta. 12 or 14 dice. Whereas something that the Soviets can do very well is that they can go to 16 and 18 dice and still have about 700 or 800 points worth of veteran bodies without too much difficulty.
Yeah, I'm gonna chuck a link on Dan's face right now for the 20 Soviet dice list that he took to what Southern Thrust was it?
Southern Thrust, and we only had like 800 something points to deal with. I went basically full on inexperienced and took 20 dice in that list.
I love it.
Which was the dice caps weren't a thing on that event.
It was the right choice. I think it breathed a lot of fresh air into the scene and
scared a few people.
High dice caps are a good thing. It challenges the player to play fast, which you went through and you did.
Barely. It was tight. I think the other reason that we probably don't see commissars as much on the competitive side of what we do is because it's a limited localized ability. So it's only a 6-inch range to target units. So typically the commissar has to babysit a unit. You will often find him babysitting the free rifle squad because it's just they work really well together. You've got the free rifle squad you didn't pay any points for, so it doesn't feel as bad when you automatically kill somebody. And you've got the double rerolls built in to do what they were told.
Yeah, don't put him next to your veteran body armored boys.
Well, I actually disagree. I think sticking him next to the inexperienced rifle squad is a crutch. I think it's a viable tactic. I don't think it's the best place to use the commissar.
I would agree.
And where would you put him?
Wherever you're attacking with your infantry. Wherever you need things to happen, that's where your commissar needs to be.
And it's actually not just where your commissar goes; it's actually where your lieutenant should be as well. That way, you're stacking all of your rerolls, all of your buffs, all of your kill off reroll in space. That's all happening in the same sort of 6-inch, 12-inch bubble on the board. You will steamroll that side of the board. Like you're going to have to get wiped out by a multi-launcher or something stupid, to get that to actually stop, because it'll just be relentless.
Yeah, you're no longer playing bolt action, you're now playing aura action. Like that seems to be the Soviet army.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you just snap everything too, right?
Yep.
You just snap it all too, and you go, I'm going to take all my actions before or even after you've shot at me. I don't care.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to get free rerolls, +2s, and all sorts of stuff, and I'm just going to keep going forward.
And this is where a big part of my training wheel mentality comes in. It's more profusive throughout the whole army, but I think here we've talked about it in Armies of Great Britain. Just the ability to ignore the pinning mechanic is very powerful bolt action, because as we say, pinning is winning. And then not only can you do that, but you can also basically ignore all of the negatives of Snap 2 and having fewer dice in the bag because you got cheap dice that you can buy in your list. It's
Yeah.
They synergize well.
Yeah, it's
They synergize well.
It's a powerful codex it's a powerful army book.
That's the right word.
that with a little bit of careful planning, perhaps maybe a little bit more than some other lists, because the synergies are a little bit more implied than they are in some other places. I think you can do a lot with very little, and that's the scary part about Soviets, is because you can do a lot with very little, but you also get a lot.
Yeah. Do we want to move on to massed battles?
Yeah. We should
Speaking
probably
of
cover
a
the
lot.
last. Yeah, we should cover the last rule. So,
does someone want to explain this one to me? Because I don't understand it.
So massed batteries, Soviets had, well, towards mid and the end of the war, they had a lot of artillery to use, and they stuck with the World War I tactic of, we're just going to bomb the living heck out of wherever you are, and then we'll send in troops. So their artillery barrages were very large and sustained. And so to reflect that in bolt action, you get mass batteries. So when an artillery barrage comes in from a forward artillery observer, so it's not prep bombardment, it's the actual artillery bombardment that comes in. When rolling to determine the fire for effect distance, which is your 6 plus d6 for the radius that you're going to impact on the board, you instead roll 2d6 and take the highest. Now, typically what that means is you are pushing those probabilities of getting a much larger radius further up the board. You don't add them together, so it doesn't become like a massive 18-inch. I'm just going to cover 3 inches, 3/4 of the board.
Oh my god!
Everyone gets pinned. It's not that, you do only take the highest. But it doesn't do anything else. So it doesn't modify the damage charts. It doesn't modify anything of how it comes in or the number of pins.
And doesn't work for prep bombardment as well, which for some reason some people thought it worked for prep bombardment.
Yep, does not involve prep bombardment.
Doesn't prep bombardment hit? And anyway, sorry, I'll leave that alone.
Well, because all we need to know for this episode is that it does not touch prep bombardment, because prep bombardment is not an artillery barrage, which. Yeah, that's a different conversation. But in this case, typically when I use it, I would normally put an artillery observer in my force anyway for when I play Soviets, because that suits my playstyle, being able to constrain and restrict where people can and can't go, and limit their ability to mobilize in a space. And I normally quite happily pitch the thought that I'm going to have a 20-inch bubble that drops down. So it'll be 9 plus. Sorry, it'll be d6 plus a 3 at the minimum. So it's 9 inches one way, 9 inches the other. On every other day, it's going to be 10 inches instead of 9 if I'm taking that sort of average scored out. But when you've got 2 dice and you can take the highest out of them regardless, it really makes a significant impact. You will generally end up with more than 10 inches in most cases. And that is huge, because you can just look at the board, and units that would think that they're safe are not. Yeah. And you can just lock them down, and it is entirely about just the pin suppression that you put down. It's not about damage. That's a nice bonus if you get it.
Yeah. Well, cool. Should we dive into the unit choices they have available?
Yeah. Let's do it.
So we'll probably just hit some of the high points and some of the unique differences. I know in a lot of the army reviews we've literally done unit by unit, but we've done a few of them now, and it's
turns out they're very similar.
Yeah, bolt action's a bit like that. A rifleman's a rifleman. We've talked about it before, so we're just going to hit on some of the key differences.
I think
looking at the HQ section, the only different one that I spotted is the Commissar, which we've already talked about.
Yeah.
I think HQ gives everything else that you'd expect to see. Veteran medics and regular medics as well, and things like that. The infantry squads, or the infantry squads and teams, is probably where it gets a bit interesting. Had a quick brief look through it. You get a lot of 12-man squads in a lot of different places, which is pretty nice. The first, I think, one that's slightly different, and one of the other things to notice that a lot of the squads are inexperienced or regular rather than regular or veteran. That's not to say you can't get veterans, but it seems you have access to a lot more. What we would consider a normal rifleman squad is able to be taken as inexperienced, which is not as often as it comes up in a lot of the other nations. What light machine gun squad is probably, I think, the first one that's slightly different. It just allows you to have 2 LMGs, which is a pretty common staple.
It's a little bit more complicated than that. So if you're playing, I guess, true to the book space, you're only allowed to take the second LMGs in the Soviet forces after 1943, I think it is.
Right.
And so typically, even if your unit selection allows 2 LMG choices, you still have to check all your time periods and theater selectors because they are auto-limited to 1. Because on paper, every division or whatever had a certain amount, but in reality, they didn't. They were either non-functional or non-existent. Yeah. And so, it's even the double LMG is a nice bonus when you're able to take advantage of it, but a lot of them are actually quite limited.
Yeah. The thing I see here is so you've got like rifle squad, light machine gun squad, and like submachine gun squad. And the thing that came up in my head was like Gorchin being like, you've got a toolbox and a wrench can work as a hammer. Like, and I think with like the US and things like that, you've got one squad and it can do a couple things like kind of well, whereas here a hammer is a hammer and a wrench is a wrench. Like these guys are like, this is what you do it well, kind of thing.
It's spot on. The Army book does that very well. I think touching on the submachine gun squad it's a squad of 12 that you can take with full SMGs, exceedingly rare. Also, you can do it as regulars, which is very uncommon. And you can even do it as inexperienced, which is hilarious and amazing. I think but like, why wouldn't you? It's 24 shots. And a lot of the times you're going to be either a point blank or you don't care about moving anyway. So starting at 4s is great. Like, it's a good thing to do.
Worried about them not doing what you want? Send a commissar.
Exactly.
Especially like at the moment, I've been playing around, and I maybe it's not a new thought, but it is to me, like, of inexperienced MMGs, especially with like Germans and stuff like that. Great, because you can just throw out enough shots that you're going to pin something.
Something to stick,
Yeah, and I think this is like next level of that. Like, you're going to throw enough shots that something's going to hit, and probably something's going to wound. Like, something's going to die if these guys hose down, even at inexperienced.
And look, there's no 12-man squad that can have SMGs. There's no 24-shot squad out there. I don't think so.
No, I think maybe
Germans can do 10 with ARs or SMGs, and maybe chuck in an LMG or 2, and you could match the volume of fire.
You can get to 20
twice as much.
You can get to 20 with Germans. There are a couple of squads that'll take full SMGs and full ARs, but 24. I think maybe one of the Marine squads, maybe one of the Raiders or something like this. You can get pretty close. Because I
probably
think
not for the cost though.
No, because you can't take them inexperienced. I think at least I know on paper the Marine squads are 13 men. I don't know if they are in the rule book. I don't have it in front of me.
I think there's one case, and it's nowhere near as good as this. You can take a squad of 20 partisans.
Oh yeah,
and you can give them. I think you can give at least a couple of them SMGs.
Okay.
So they can fire more shots, but they're partisans. They don't get as many cool rules and shit like that.
That's true. I think I would not that, says the guy who's about to start a partisan army. I would rather take a 9-point Soviet inexperienced SMG gunner than I would a 9-point partisan SMG gunner.
I think they're 10
because of the
points.
national rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Just stopping the inevitable. Actually,
Yeah.
yeah,
I keep forgetting that SMGs are 3 points unless you already have Tough Fighter.
yeah,
But yeah.
Yeah.
And another interesting, unique thing to the Soviets is the tank rider squad, which can't be taken in experience, but that's okay. Take them regular or veteran. You can take body armor, which is one of the other unique things in the Soviet army book. It's basically -1 to wound. I think it's technically -1 to wound with like small arms, HE, and I think that's it.
Close combat as well.
Close combat as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So it will force. It's expensive. Like it's 5 points a model to give them the body armor, and you have to equip the entire squad if you give it to them.
Yeah.
So that does become quite pricey. The difference is, for example, if you put it on regular troops, there's a bit of a sweet number, because if you end up putting too many regular troops and then paying the points, you're almost paying veteran points. So you get a small number of veterans with body armor instead. But if you're gonna pay for it on your veterans, there is a downside. So whilst you need natural 6s to kill those SOBs, and they're very hard to kill. The reality is you're also restricted to essentially half your run move is restricted to 6 inches by default.
Right. Okay.
And so you lose mobility, which is why they ride a tank.
Yeah. Okay. So I think there's like a hidden cost of body armor where you're not just paying the 5 points per model, but now you're also paying for a taxi. Whether that is
whether it's a truck whether it's a truck or a half track or a tank, you would normally want them protected with something. And then there's a whole interaction of that when they're targeted, they jump off, and so you can be targeted by a mortar, and that forces you to dismount and things like that. Even you actually can be targeted by something that wouldn't necessarily hurt the tank, but the tank riders are like, we're not having any of that, and they just get off.
Yeah, fair enough. Delousing, I think it's called.
I kind of like the idea of getting like a rather cheap tank with maybe some machine guns on it, and just yeeting it down the board, using it like a transport. But then you've suddenly got this tank in you with about, if you're going full veteran kind of thing, these guys are not going to shift. It's probably easier to shoot the tank than shoot these guys. And so I think it creates a really interesting problem of, well, I've got this tank up against me, and I've also got this tanky unit up against me. And so it kind of creates that choice. That I think
it's a dual threat.
Cool. Yeah.
Now, when they're actually mounted up on the tank, it's as if they're in a transport, so they can't be targeted separately. But you could absolutely do it on a tank. I have a few thoughts around what would be absolutely disgusting to do on a tank anyway. But there's quite a lot of options.
I like this for your 30-inch land grab that you like to do, Dan, where you have a transport filled with veterans and you run at 24 inches, hoping that they pop it, so your veterans disembark 1 to 6 inches and go down. This is basically that, except your veterans can't be hurt in the process.
Pretty much.
Because
you disembark them straight into. You disembark them straight into cover, and you just go, good job.
Because the disembark happens when it's targeted, so there's no interaction between sort of the vehicle exploding and the tank riders and
No, so if they're in a vehicle as a regular transport and not on a tank, they're subject to all regular rules.
What I'm saying.
The damage is still a natural 6 though, which is not very many.
No, what I was saying is you get to do the transport trick on a tank without any of the negatives. Admittedly, like if it's
tanks move slower technically.
Yeah, you lose the 6 inches on it, but I think it's a fair trade.
Well, considering that they're essentially,
especially if it's a vehicle you're already going to take.
Yeah.
And if you leave those last 2 orders until the end of the turn, and you just run your tank 18 inches down a road, or just directly forward onto the board, and you just plow it into the middle, then for the rest of the game, those tank riders can actually get wherever they need to go.
Yeah.
And so it's the opening entry cost of doing it is actually not as hard as what it sounds, but there might be some better options.
Can you re-embark on the tank?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It's just that they use the tank as a transport.
That's cool.
Now, of course, that means that the tank is also used as a transport. So if you re-embark on top of it, that means that the tank is not doing anything for that turn.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
So that there is a cost associated with re-embarking as well, which normally you wouldn't consider doing that. Normally you would just take you just drop them off, and then the tank runs around and goes, just shoot things.
Yeah. So looking at what we've got after that, guard squad, veteran squad, they seem like other squads in other units. Is there anything you guys want to say on those in particular? Otherwise,
captured Panzerfaust is nice.
Yeah, you can get a captured Panzerfaust. I like how they put it in brackets to make sure you know it's captured. Yeah.
You know what's funny about that is when you actually do the theatre selectors, the guard squads with captured Panzerfaust are actually eligible for selection before the German units are allowed to take Panzerfaust into theatre selectors.
Oh my god.
That's great.
I just want to go back to tank riders for a sec, because it's fairly cheap, because the weapon selection, everyone's got SMGs, and they're getting the tank rider rule, and 65 points for 5. So what does that end up being?
So if you're taking them as regular, you're
13 points a model for regs.
Yeah, so
the tank rider's free,
but they've got it. Yeah, they've already got the SMG.
Well, okay. Technically, you've already got your SMG, but you're actually paying for that SMG, so that's counted in their essentially the 5-point increase, and you're also essentially going to be paying for the tank rider rule.
No, it's 13 points a model, so the tank rider is free.
There you go.
Sorry, 13. Yeah, I can't do math. 13 points a model.
That's what Jacob's saying. The tank rider's free.
Yeah. That's cool.
And
so
and
then
why
would you take? Why would you take the
veterans?
SMG squad? No, the SMG squad.
It's a good question.
Because the SMG squad can run.
The tank riders can run. You don't have to give them body armor.
Only 6 though. Yeah, well, no, it's true. Yeah. So yeah. So
the SMG can take one more dude.
One
These
more.
could be up to 11.
And inexperienced.
And inexperienced.
So my Russian list so far consists of an SMG squad and a tank rider.
The other thing is tank rider squads. When you're using theatre selectors, are generally one of the restricted squad types.
Yeah.
So you can't normally double down on them that much.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. In terms of between the two, if you were going to take them and not give them body armor, tank riders are more versatile. It's like one less man, but more versatile what they're able to do.
No, that's cool.
So
it is very cool.
After the guards and veteran squads, which are just regular and veteran squads,
they get some tooling up. The veterans get the ability to take Tough Fighter instead of purchasing submachine guns. They can just buy Tough Fighter. But yeah, they're fairly stock standard.
You got the NKVD squads, which are
regular fanatics.
Yeah,
is again not something that everybody has access to, but it's nice.
Yeah, it really feels like so far, like the Soviets want to be in your face from all of this. Like, you've got tank riders with submachine guns, you've got submachine gun squads, you've got tough fighter rifles if you want them, and fanatic rifles if you want them. Like, it's kind of like they're designed to be there.
Yeah, and I'd just probably wind it back a little bit. So for the NKVD squad, for the veteran squad, for the guard squad, all of those units can just pay to have submachine guns on every man.
Yeah.
And so like even my like most basic regular squad, which I typically run as a guard squad, if I want that to be a submachine gun squad, I just buy the submachine guns anyway. Or I can just say, yes, you get one and you get one and you get one. I can just do that for whatever I want. Some of the theatre books offer other options for those NKGB squads, which are quite good as well, but we won't cover those in today's session. But yeah, they've got some very fun interactions. Schriftbat squads. I'd probably murdered that name. But
Strafbat. Yeah.
Strafbat. Yeah.
Yeah. There's I think now we're getting into some of the spicy stuff and spicy not in a good way. These guys can be unarmed at 4 points each, which is nice. You can also then upgrade the unarmed guys with rifles for 3 points to pay your total 7 points per man. They can also be shirkers, which is hilarious. And the unarmed guys can neither shoot nor attack in close quarters. Only values casualties.
So what you're saying is you could have 10 bodies for 10 points.
Almost. Well, yeah. And the entire purpose of those things would be to absorb casualties and tie up an opposing unit.
Yeah. So this is like where we're coming into cheap order dice territory. So like what Commissar's 15 points, a Strafbat pot is 35 points. I don't think you can get it cheaper because you can give them all shirkers. You're down to like 20 points. So you're back up to 35 points for 2 order dice. And then there's I know there's a few other places where you can buy some cheap order dice. I think the count that I got to was like 100 points for like 6 or 7 order dice. I've seen like 10 order dice for sub 200 or something like this, or very close to that. So it gets pretty absurd pretty quickly. And then you don't really mind doing that because you can pick up insane veterans and you get a free inexperienced rifle squad at 12 men.
Yeah.
The catch cry, of course, is that having all those order dice and having those units that are sort of cheap and a little bit spicy, they do require a bit of extra effort to make them work on the battlefield. That is the only. It's not as simple as just running them forward, and they're not like bonsai. Bamboo spearmen, for example, they don't perform the same role as what they do. And
this is what I'm saying. Like you basically just buy them and ignore the fact that they exist on the table, and then you use. Because normally when you're buying veteran expensive stuff, you lose order dice. So you're paying like 150, 200 points. You get 10 order dice. You smooth that over, and you're like, right now, what do I actually want to use for my 800 points?
Now I'm going to build my 7 dice veteran list.
I'm going to build my army.
So your cavalry squad, next one, pretty standard cavalry squad as far as I can tell.
They can take an LMG.
Yeah. I think the Polish one can take a BAR, which is hilarious because you also can't use it on horseback.
But you could always there's 2 different ways to run cavalry. So out of the entire Soviet list, this cavalry is not the cavalry you would use for an aggressive charge action or shooting action. This cavalry would be used for maneuverability and getting a unit into position faster, and then dismounting and then fighting as regular troops on the ground.
I found an interesting thing here is that they don't come with horses. You have to so you can have a cavalry squad with no horses, which is kind of funny.
Cavalry is a battlefield role. It's not specifically mounted on horses.
Why buy them horses when I can spend slightly less points and give them all tough fighter instead?
People's Militia Squad, another unarmed squad. Oh, this one's green.
Yeah, it is.
But you can't take them as shirkers. So that's really the difference in this one and that Strafbat squad.
Yeah.
And this one I think can also have anti-tank rifle grenades, which I don't think the Strafbat can take. So People's Militia Squad's pretty good.
Yeah.
If you're looking for something cheap. Siberian squads, this just looks like a slightly different version of a veteran squad.
Yeah, there is the FAQ corrects the costing in the book to reduces it back to the normal expected costs you'd have for regular and veteran.
Yeah.
So what it does do is obviously give you the ability to have a regular unit with tough fighter as well. So you can pay tough fighter, and that's something that, again, not many others. So I can choose regulars to get fanatics. I can choose regulars to get tough fighter. I can choose cavalry and not take the horses. There's a few different things.
Now, interestingly, I haven't seen any stubborn. I might have missed it, but there seems to be very little stubborn in this book.
No. It's coming up.
Yeah, but even so, like you think about
already stubborn.
Think about the no, yeah. I don't know if ignoring pins or rerolls is more which one's equivalent, but yeah, I get your point. I can't see any stubborn here.
No.
So anyway,
I was thinking of a different rule. They actually don't get stubborn.
So there's your answer.
They don't get stubborn.
Don't take stubborn because you can't take it. It's not in the rule book.
Well, they don't get stubborn in their Armies of book.
Yeah. Ski troopers.
These guys are cool for theme.
Yeah. Although I don't think I've ever actually. So the thing that they get is they get ignore movement penalties, snow and winter conditions. Not that I've ever literally played a game with snow and winter conditions.
That's like very specific scenarios, I think.
Yeah, I'm absolutely certain there's like people and our listeners are just like, you don't play bolt action wrong, you don't play thematic scenarios. And it's like, look, you're probably right.
I was going to say it's like we're growing in that space. There's a few different things, but I also, these guys work from a thematic point of view with the Erasan transport vehicle, which we'll cover, which is basically a it's an ice sled with a giant turbofan on the back that just pushes it along, and these guys hook up behind it as a transport, and they dragged by its skis. It's brilliant. It's horrible as a vehicle in terms of its profile, but they're cheap and they just.
Here's the surprise. Airborne Squad doesn't have stubborn, which is stubborn is
unusual.
Is the default bolt action rule given to paratroopers. That's the thing that makes them paratroopers, apparently, in bolt action, but not here, it seems.
Well, I mean, Russian paratroopers, and in the background they talk about there was only I think 1 or 2 attempted drops, and then they went, this actually isn't working for us. You are now a field division.
Yeah.
they just went, so you can just be on the ground like everybody else.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing about Airborne is that it's a very offensive unit. And I think for most of, the war, the Russians were fighting a very defensive war. So dropping...
I think only for about a year or two. Sort of 41, 42 is when it turned around.
Yeah.
I think you'll find that the other thing an air attack really requires is good logistical planning and
that too.
Good strategic management. And I don't think those things were as strong in the Soviet force. Certainly not consistent in the Soviet force, depending on where you fought. It was a massive front. But yeah, they can only be veteran. They can pay for tough fighter. Once again, they can all have SMGs, but it's a fairly stock standard squad, and they trade the tough fighter for stubborn instead.
Neat. Next one is Naval Squad. I can't see any special rules here. It's just a different assortment of weapons. I'm trying to... They come with tough fighters.
They come with tough fighter, so it's an automatic tough fighter boost, so they're quite nice. But it's outside of that.
Slightly more expensive.
Yeah. Again, they can all have SMGs, and they only pay the 2 points because they come with tough fighter base. So,
yeah.
Partisan Squad. Interesting that you actually get one in the core rulebook. They can be shirkers, tank hunters with anti-tank grenades. Here you're sort of soft capped to what we would consider a normal rifle squad loadout. 1 SMG, 1 LMG, anti-tank grenades if you want. But you can't take them regular, which makes sense, I guess, from an inexperienced partisan perspective. But nothing...
You can make them shirkers, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems to be a recurring theme. Now, this is a surprising unit that doesn't get played much.
Scouts.
The Scout Squad.
This squad's actually, in my mind, the Scout squads are actually super competitive. They max out at 7 men, so it's actually one of, if not the smallest force in terms of infantry squads that the Soviets can purchase. But what you get is actually quite good. So again, all can have SMGs, great, tick that box. And then in terms of options, because I never consider anti-tank grenades for them. So in terms of options, it's pretty much add men and add SMGs to them. But they get forward deployment. They also get behind enemy lines. So if they choose to outflank, they ignore that -1 coming onto the battlefield, and because they're already veteran, that pretty much means you can bring a 7-man squad on from the flank and have SMGs ready to go, or rifles if you want the range.
Yep.
What I find interesting here is the picture has body armor, but
it's because
for the
assault
assault
engineer squad.
engineers.
It's the next one.
right, okay, it's the formatting of the book. My bad. I was like, that's weird.
Yeah.
I really like this unit. I would
Forward deploying 7 guys, even with rifles, is a problem. Like that, that's actually something that is a challenge.
When I played with
this
my
is
Australians, even just a platoon scout team of 3 veterans with SMGs is a pain in the bum. Sorry, I cut you off there, Jacob.
No, you're right. I mean, to get this kind of rule in Germany, you have to be playing with theatre lists.
Yeah.
And you have to be paying a basic, probably about the same points. But yeah, no, that is really cool. But we're going to get to more stuff that they can forward deploy later as well, which is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Now comes the fun thing, assault engineers, which is an engineer squad as we know it that can go up to 11 men, which is absurd.
No, it's fine.
All of them can have SMGs, 1 flamethrower, whole squad can have body armor, and anti-tank grenades and LMGs and all the other normal stuff. But why would you? I think in an engineer squad,
Absolutely.
This is insane.
They're also given the ability to have 2 captured Panzerfausts in the errata. So
Yeah,
they also get it. Why not? Just give them an extra 2 of those as well.
I can't really say I'm surprised. This is insane.
Yeah, this is where your points go from all the all the other dice.
Yeah. Typically, I like this squad is the one that are like, if I really want to get out and just punch somebody in the face, I'd use an assault engineer squad, and I'd put them as close to anything as I possibly could and split fire off the Panzerfaust to cause additional damage. And then I'd just wreak havoc on whatever I hit.
Did just a quick question. Looking at it, do any other armies get body armor?
No.
I don't think so.
No, not certainly not out of the standard.
Not in
rule
Armies
books.
of.
You get things like gun shields on certain weapon teams or artillery, which is that similar effect. But body armor is a very unique Soviet thing that they've put in. It might be in some of the theater books, maybe, but I don't recall any instances off the top of my head.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's a German unit that gets body armor, but I can't recall one, and I don't remember seeing one. I know they experimented with a little bit. I know the US kind of didn't, not at least not in this context with steel plates and stuff. One of the, super weird. I think one of the things we didn't mention about body armor was that it doesn't stack with extra protection that you get in buildings.
Correct.
So you can't go to a 7 to wound, just in case anybody had this idea of sticking some assault engineers in a building. It's still
or assaulting into a building and being like, well, this is what we do, and we're also invincible.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a full squad with SMGs, a flamer, and body armor, you're around 250 points.
Yeah, it's almost, and then you got to add a transport because they'll be slow.
Yeah.
So typically they'll be in a truck. And so it's a 300-point combo in 2 dice.
Yeah, well, good thing you can pick up like 5, 6, 7, 8 dice at under 200 points somewhere else.
and that trucks carry 12, and so they can just all jump in.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Next one is the motorcycle squad. Nothing really surprising here from a motorcycle squad perspective.
No, it's actually fairly stock standard. The exception being everyone can have a submachine gun.
Yep.
Can they fire from their motorbikes?
No, they can't fire from their motorbike. But it's the quick move or escape reaction and then dismount, and I'm just going to come back at you with SMGs.
Yeah, because I don't think motorcycles can advance and fire just in general.
Yeah, only Africa Corps ones can.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So
there's the German bikes with LMGs mounted on them, but that's about it.
That's a 20
for an armored car slot.
That is. I don't know if it's actually better to buy transport or to go for a motorcycle. I think a motorcycle with an infinite number of pivots and a run is probably a little bit better.
There's other benefits, like, so I've been talking to you guys sort of off the side of what my next bolt action army would be if I'm going to build one for some sort of competitive drive. And I was looking at the motorcycle squads for the Soviets because when, like, each model that you get in terms of the motorcycles, essentially you don't get 10 motorcycle models. You get as many or as little motorcycle models as you want. And so it's like, so I could have 2 per bike and 3 with bike and sidecar. So I could get essentially 3 bikes and sidecars. That's a very small unit profile to be able to then hide and not be visible.
Yeah, because
see where I'm going with that.
It's an 11-man squad here, so that's
it's only 4 bikes.
It's not a lot of bikes, man. Oh, and then that just vomits out into like this 12-man blob, 11-man blob.
I wouldn't take just one of them, Gorgon.
It's worse than a 3/4 ton truck because of the true 156 scale vehicles and like 28mm models. It's like this tiny little beep just vomits out 8 guys. That's some real clown car. So before we get in some TARDIS level of it's bigger on the inside, moving on to teams. Medium machine gun team with a gun shield. That's nice. Standard cost there, nothing to write home about. You can get a HMG, which not many nations can. It is the Dishka. Very interestingly, with a pintle mount and a gun shield.
Yep.
Which is good. Like that is good. A pintle mount is spicy.
It's great. It's the ability to go, I can now just suddenly take it as flak when I wasn't otherwise considering any flak. Because normally I don't get many HMGs on pintles unless I put them on my vehicles, right? And I don't often want to waste the points there because I'm paying for body armor and engineers. So to be able to potentially throw an extra one down as inexperienced and pay like sort of 59 points for a 3-shot heavy machine gun with gun shield and flak, so it's really a regular.
Does the pintle? I know pintle gives you flak. Does it also give you 360-degree arc of fire?
No.
All right, it's not as spicy as I thought. Never mind.
I find weird is
I don't believe it gives me the 360.
Yeah,
it's not a rotating platform.
What I find weird is the firer and 3 loaders. Yeah. Like you get. Why do you have so many loaders for an HMG?
I think the US HMG is a 4-man team as well.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah.
Most, in fact, I think outside of Germany, who's got the crossover of their MMG being their LMG, but also their HMG sort of space, I think most HMGs are 4-man crews.
Yeah. I mean, I think that just attests
that little bit more when you're shot by a sniper.
Yeah, I think that just attests to the fact that we don't see that many HMGs on the field. Like, unfortunate.
I mean, for 50 points, 4-men scoring unit, pintle-mounted HMG with a gun shield, you might see them.
Yeah.
You get a victory point for running them.
You're approaching sort of like inexperienced MMG territory there. And for good reason. I think it could work. I think it's really just the fact that they're 3 shots. I think if a HMG was 5 shots and everything else being equal,
or even 4 shots, 4 shots at +1 pen.
Yeah. Now you're talking. But moving on, now we get into. We've talked about the sugar and the spice, and now we talk about everything nice for the Soviets. It says they're anti-tank slots. So a lot of these they can take 3 for 1. The first one is an anti-tank rifle team. Not much. Yep. This is pretty standard 2-man team with an anti-tank rifle. But you can take 3 instead of 1, which is very nice. This is again at 21 points each. This is where you're picking up some more of your cheap dice. You're looking at 63 points for 3 auto dice, 15 points for commissar. You're at 4 auto dice for what's that, 76 points. 4 auto dice for 76 points. 3 squad. You're at 5 auto dice for 76 points. It's pretty gross. Now the real fun one is the Molotov launcher or the
great.
Ampoulement. I'm trying to like understand this thing's profile. So it's a 1-inch HE.
It's 1-inch HE. It's a team weapon.
Or is it 2-inch?
With 3.
This is in V1
language.
Yeah, so it's HED6.
It's HED6, sorry. So that would be the 2-inch. So it's 2-inch. It's a range of 24. what does one shot. It essentially is forced to fire like an indirect weapon, almost.
It doesn't have the indirect rule, though.
No, but what I mean by that is the way that you would want to use it is more like, I'm going to go hit a template on something and set it on fire like it was an indirect weapon. So its attack profile is direct, but it's directed 24 inches. So if you're not in 24 inches, you can't do anything. But yeah, being able to take potentially 3 of them and at a 24-inch bubble will drop down 3 templates that potentially set people on fire on the roll of a 6, for example, on armored transports. You're betting on 6s, which is never a good thing to do. But this doesn't take up your artillery slot, and it doesn't take up your vehicle slot, which means that you can combine them with other multi-launchers and just go template crazy on people.
No, I think what you're buying here is you're buying a light howitzer that can't fire, or with it. Okay, so it doesn't quite work, but you're basically buying a Blacker Bombard with a with a bonus thing that if you hit on a 6,
you set it on fire.
But only if you fail to penetrate those.
It's only on vehicles. Yeah. It's only on vehicles, and it doesn't cause if this.
No, but you don't get both. Is what I'm saying.
No,
you if you hit and penetrate, then you only get the result of the penetration, regardless of what you rolled to hit.
Yep.
If you roll to hit on a 6 and fail to penetrate the armor, then you catch it on fire.
Yep, you automatically set it on fire. Yep. Now, what's interesting?
Nice.
Well, you know what, and it's especially nice considering the points value, 28 for inexperienced. Just let that sink in. 40 for regular or 52 for veteran.
Yeah.
Right? Now, it is a team weapon, so snipers can one-shot kill them off. That's fine. What I think would really push this into the level of insane is if they'd taken that sort of flamethrower effect on the vehicle and actually applied it as a flamethrower effect as throwing a Molotov on fire at someone, which is basically what it was. So if that had done a flamethrower test, like morale check on the unit that
put
it
in the bin. No, then
I'd be like, I'm not saying it doesn't work that way, but I'm saying if it did work that way, even if I had to pay like 80 points for it, I'd take 3 of them and I'd just ram them forward and go, take 3 flamethrowers, enjoy.
I think the only thing stopping this from being like a pretty competitive choice is the fixed special rule.
Yes.
Like it's going to take at least 2 turns to shoot something, and it's a range of 24, so you can't.
And that's what I meant.
Well, yeah, you'll be shooting stuff at turn 2, because if your average deployment zone is 12 inches up, and
you should run at the first turn.
Yeah, you'll be on for most games you'll be on the halfway board by at the top of turn 2, with the exception of maybe first.
3 of them.
Yeah. I think this is slept on locally. This thing's nuts.
I kind of disagree. Yeah. Only on the basis that it's actually very easy to neutralize in turn, because you need, it's not the line of sight or whatever. It's like it's only 3 guys, so that's it's not hard to kill off. You have to get it close for it to do its damage, but it doesn't negate down, it doesn't negate cover, it doesn't negate any of those things. So the actual chance of you hitting makes it a direct fire indirect weapon.
Yeah, it feels.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
and that's my drawback that I have with it is, unless you can catch something out in the open, so you can take advantage of your 3+ shot, and that will go to a 5+ shot when they go down. You're essentially going to the enemy is just going to go, I'm not going to play that game. I'm going down.
I think I actually would really, I think
denying a bigger unit for 28 points. Hell yeah!
I think also the other thing you can do with this, and I get your point about taking inexperienced and all that, but I actually think like taking this inexperienced is probably not the best use case. And the other thing I would actually maybe not caution, but I think it might be possible is sort of. There's obviously 3 use cases. One is the one that we talked about, where you use it as a direct fire support weapon, right? as a shoulder fired thing, basically, that you move up and you hit hard targets or infantry out in the open or infantry in buildings, for example. The other sort of use case that I just sort of touched on there is using it to hit fortified positions, or put them in a position where they threaten like a building or a key piece of terrain, and then you whack them on ambush or something like this. And then the third one is that you put them in a position where your opponent can't see them, but they're covering lines of advance. So suddenly, if they want to get through your lines, there's now an ampulate team in ambush on their side or whatever.
Yeah,
I think that's really good.
Yeah, so I would agree with that use case. And so that's actually the same use case that I would typically try to apply to my machine gun teams on foot when I take them. So think about this for half a second. We take 3 ampulate launchers and a machine gun team, and they actually sit on our objectives out of sight, covering those fire lanes. All of them shoot 24 to 36 inches. No one's going to want to go near any of that.
Yeah. And even if you took these guys as regular... Oh man, this is disgusting.
Just pay for it all as regular. Just all regular.
You're not even with all of that plus all the other cheap stuff that we talked about. You're not even at like 200 points, maybe 300, and you're sitting on like 6 or 7 order dice.
Once you'd be so if you took those 4 units at regular, it's 170 points and 4 order dice. But you can basically so it's
120, 40 by 3. It's 120
plus the machine gun team for 50.
Yeah.
And you go so for 170 points if I take those in the 4 order dice, and I can hard cap objectives in my backline out of sight, and there's not anything like, unless you're playing someone like Finns that are going to come in behind you, in which case you just put them up the board and turn them backwards.
And then this is awful. You're with the commissar and the free rifleman squad. You're at 5 order dice for sub 200, and they're all good. And then except maybe the medium machine gun team, but it has
It's got its only purpose though is to detract, right? So it's like if someone wants to eat 5 machine gun bullets, then they can. But and then pad it out with motorcycle squads.
All right,
we should move forward to the next 2 teams.
So next one is the Tank Hunters anti-tank team, which is a bit more spicy.
This is very spicy.
It's a 2 to 4 man team of any rating. All of them can have submachine guns. You can get 1 Panzerfaust in the squad of 4. You can take 3 of these teams as per usual. They can forward deploy, and so we see where this is going. And they have tough tank fighters, tough tank hunters.
Which is basically what you were saying, which is tough fighters against vehicles.
But it's V1 tough fighters.
It's V1 tough fighter.
So it's double the number of attacks rather than exploding hits.
So your 4-man squad actually goes in with 8 attacks.
Hey, it's not bad.
It's very good. When you can take 3 of them, 3 sets of 4 of them, and they can all forward deploy.
Keep in mind that it also says any mix. So you can have 1 or 2 of these. You could have an ampulate launcher.
They don't have to be the same selection. So you can actually mix and match these. Yeah.
I thought it was
awesome.
I thought it was you got 3 of 1, but no, it's any mix.
Any. It's way better than that. Yeah.
You take 1 of these. You take a couple of amplemets. Oh man. Why am I playing Americans? The next one is the dog mines.
Next thing you know, Perth's bolt action scene is nothing but Soviets everywhere.
Well, I said that about the British last time.
Yeah, I'm not going to claim any arrogance, say that we caused that, but it was a hell of a coincidence that after the Armies of Great Britain episode, like the next tournament, like the Allies was like 75 or 80% British. It was wild. With great audiences comes great responsibility. Dogmine anti-tank team is the next colourful one.
Awesome.
So 2 handlers plus a dog mine. The dog doesn't get a model. It's just a weapon.
It's like a marker.
Any handler can have a submachine gun, can be a 4-man squad instead of a 2-man squad. And so the dog mine is a 1-shot. This is like the Russian equivalent of a Goliath mine, right?
Yeah.
It's better than a Goliath mine.
Yeah.
Okay. Range of 18 can only target stationary vehicles, so can't have a runner advance. Fired as normal, instead of rolling to hit, you roll on the table. and Reki ends up with the dog being destroyed result. So dog 1, it targets the closest friendly stationary vehicle within range instead of the target with no line of sight needed, and then explodes. Ouch.
Teleporting dog bomb. So move all your vehicles first.
2 to 3, dog is gunned down and is destroyed. 4 to 6, the vehicle suffers a hit with a pen of 5.
Yeah.
And you can take
with
3
no
of these.
additional modifiers.
No additional modifiers. So it's a straight +5 pen, blows up on the underneath. But the reason why it's so good is essentially you are auto hitting if you are rolling that 4, 5, or 6. There is no way that it doesn't need line of sight. The target needs line of sight, but it's a one-shot weapon, and you just rock up with 4 dudes, and you go. The dog mine is a one-shot weapon, so it's going to go over to that tank. We now have 4 submachine guns that are going to shoot somewhere else.
I think this is great because you can take 3 of them at inexperienced, and it doesn't matter. Like, they don't get a neg one to hit. They're just on the table.
Yeah,
it's just on the table.
And there's no long range.
That's a good point.
Yeah, you're always hitting on a 4 within 18 inches.
Yeah.
And just make sure the tanks aren't next to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's essentially just a very explosive Panzerfaust, because then you can use the teams as submachine guns.
Yeah.
It's a big brain comparison there, Tyler. Comparing a dog with a mine to a Panzerfaust.
It's slightly longer range with a bit more restrictions and slightly less penetration value.
Isn't it Panzerfaust 5?
I think it is. And
it is?
No, I think
the Shrek 6.
Oh, I always get those mixed up. But either well then okay, so it's almost outright better because your hitting chances is 50% as opposed to any hit modifier in the game. And it has slightly longer range than a Panzerfaust. Yes, you only get one of them, but if you bulk up on all 3 of them and target the same tank, that tank is probably cooked.
How's that for a snap too?
Yeah.
Let's slip the dogs of war. Sniper team, pretty standard. No. Actually, no. They've only got the sniper rifle.
Correct. No pistols, no subbies, just sniper rifle.
And also the assistant doesn't have a rifle.
Nope. You get one shot.
That's interesting. That is a little bit of a change there. The flamethrower team, pretty standard flamethrower team, except you can, for 5 points, you can upgrade it to being immune to exceptional damage. I'm guessing that also applies to snipers then, hey?
Yeah, it's all exceptional damage, and it's specifically there so snipers can't kill them. So the flamethrower team, the Rocks too, they were actually, to try and hide their flamethrowers, they deliberately designed them as rifles, and so you can pay for that upgrade and get that upgrade onto your guys, and so they can't be targeted for exceptional damage. So you're always forced for that loader to kill off first, which would trigger your morale check, which you then reroll because you're Soviet. It basically means that the flamer doesn't die.
You have to kill it a traditional way.
You have to kill it the traditional way. But
mortar section standard.
These ones are all stock standard. And so we won't cover those. Same with the first 3 howitzers, being light, medium, and heavy. They're all stock standard.
I probably wouldn't take the light howitzer that's in here.
Not compared to the other options.
No, and we'll get to that in a second. I just wouldn't bother taking the light howitzer on for the Soviets, and it'll be one of the anti-tank guns. It's basically the 25 pounder, but the other way, and a little bit better. So anti-aircraft guns, we've got heavy automatic cannon that's fixed and flak. We've got a light automatic cannon with gun shield built in and fixed and flak. So no rotating platforms, which is a bit sad, but oh well. We can't all have nice toys.
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of other things, right?
Light anti-tank gun is a 2-band team, which is pretty cool. Although, does artillery get small team?
I
think there's an exception that they don't.
I can't recall. I don't think they do.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. We'll have to check ultimately, it kind of doesn't matter because they're cheap.
Yeah, it's true. 50 points. Although to be fair, I would always just
40?
take the for inexperienced. Yeah,
just take the experienced one.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to take a light anti-tank gun, don't take the 45mm. Take the M42. It's
Yes.
at short range. It's +1 pen value. Which is pretty
That's
good.
pretty cool.
Good old HVAP.
Well, it's still got the gun shield. It's still 2-man team, which so that gives you some survivability problems. But it means that your light anti-tank gun at close range is +5. I mean, that's not bad.
Yeah. Although again, we'll get to like why
where you should go instead.
Yeah. So you've got the Ziz 2.
It's coming.
It's just a medium anti-tank gun with a 3-man
Standard.
team.
Yep. Good solid weapon.
But Ziz 3.
The Ziz 3 is where it's at.
Yeah.
So
this is sorry.
80 points.
80 points.
I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's really hard to not take this gun.
4-man team, medium anti-tank gun. I mean, Gorchin, you and I commented when we were talking about my 20 dice list. They were like, "Why didn't you buy a Ziz 3, you idiot, as opposed to just the Ziz 2? Because there's only a 5-point difference."
Yeah, you idiot.
Yeah. And in hindsight, I probably should have done that. But you get the ability to fire as a light howitzer and a medium anti-tank gun, which that's the versatility is just brilliant. Everyone likes it with the short 25-pounder.
Yeah.
We like it when it's when your Chaffee, for example, has a good anti-tank shot plus a HE shot. It's all in that space where you get your options, and the options make the units particularly good. The Ziz 3 just happens to be cheaper than most of those options.
It's more expensive than a light howitzer, which is fair enough. So I can see why you might not take it, but I think because you have access to templates in so many other places,
don't worry about that.
I think because you're getting so many other cheap units everywhere, you can find I think that the 20-point upgrade or the 30-point upgrade that it is to get a light howitzer that can fire as a medium anti-tank gun.
That's the way to look at it.
Yeah.
That's it.
The 85mm is a heavy anti-tank gun with a shield. The A19 is oh my god,
monstrous. This thing is an upgraded Ziz 3.
It's a heavy anti-tank gun and medium howitzer for 100 points.
Yep.
Although
it has a
negative
drawback
one.
When firing as an anti-tank gun, it's -1 to hit.
Yeah.
It never receives a +1.
So
medium howitzer with a backup AT. That's fine.
Yeah.
And typically the cost point there is most people will go, is it worth that extra boost in the profiling to do the 100 points, or am I willing to work with the medium anti-tank and light howitzer and take the slightly cheaper version? But I have looked at whether I'd get a model for an A19 field gun for the 100 points to just sort of play with it and see what it's like.
Yeah, I wonder
it is
if you're
massive.
Yeah, I wonder if we're looking at this the other way as well. If a medium howitzer is 75 points, I note that the A19 can't get a spotter. I don't think the Ziz 3 gets one either. Just some things to keep in mind there. But I wonder if we're looking at this the wrong way. So medium howitzer without a spotter, regular, is 75 points. For 25 points, you can upgrade a medium howitzer to fire as a heavy anti-tank gun at -1 to hit.
Yeah.
Like that's only at long range. And wait, it's only at long range? What's that? 36 inches is short range for a heavy anti-tank gun?
That's right. So, you always receive the -1 as if it was firing at long range. So it's a static -1 across the board, and you never get +1 for point blank. But to be honest, if something has got within 6 inches of you in point blank, you're probably going to use the howitzer shot anyway.
Yeah.
And just be like, twos?
Honestly, very few people are going to go, oh, it's a heavy anti-tank gun that only hits on 4s. Yes, I'm going to move my tank out in the open where you can see it. People are not playing that game.
Yeah.
No, it's like, so what you're telling me is there's a 50% chance that this becomes cream butter paste all over the battlefield. Yeah, I'm not going there.
Right.
It is good. It is good. I just haven't found a way to put it in the list yet.
It wouldn't. The -1 doesn't stack with long range as well.
It is the long range.
It is just applied constantly.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's cool. That's even better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because it's not like inexperienced where you've always got. It's like all of the other modifiers still count. Huh. That's pretty tasty.
I mean,
last
if
one
you
to
really
round
wanted
out.
to get it, if you really wanted to get it cheap, you just take it as inexperienced anyway,
Oh man.
because that's the same cost as is 2-3.
Like, I don't like
It's
that.
a harder choice though, right? Because then you got a -2 flat.
I don't
every
like
time.
that at all. I get the appeal of taking everything inexperienced because you can, but I feel like you have to be a lot more careful with that than you think. Like the regular to veteran upgrade is a totally different calculation to an inexperienced to regular upgrade.
And different purposes as well.
Yeah. So the last one is just a heavy anti-tank gun shield, team weapon fixed, all the other good stuff. Now we move into tanks. Right off the bat, a few things worth mentioning is that there are like 400,000 variants of Soviet tanks. And that's just the ones that are in the bolt action books. And if you look at it in real life, it gets even worse. Basically, if you want a tank with something on it, the Soviets have it. If you want a light tank with autocannons and MMGs, it's there. If you want one with light anti-tank guns and coaxial MMGs, if you want ones with flamethrowers, if you want recce light tanks,
and if you want them at any experience level, it's fine.
Yeah. If you want them amphibious, if you want them to have howitzers, it's all there. We can go through them one by one, but the main thing about this is if you want some specific combination, it exists in the Soviet rulebook. So just go nuts.
Either in the tanks or in the armored cars, you're going to get that variance.
Yeah.
Probably. So I would, as a Soviet player, the ones that I would call out is the T-34 variants that take the hull-mounted flamethrowers, because it does not go in the turret.
Yeah,
so you get a whole flamethrower and a regular T-34 gun on top.
Very good. I think the Sherman Crocodile is similar. I know the Churchill or Cromwell or something like this can do something like that. Yeah.
Yep. So that works for the T-34 76 and the T-34 85. So the 85 is the heavy anti-tank gun.
Let's drop down that first page to OT-26.
Yep.
105 for a flaming tank. Why would you take an engineer squad and a transport if you can? I mean, you're contesting that slot. It's the slot
because there's so much other better stuff to put in the.
There is.
See, the OT-26 tank riders, assault engineers, truck. Now you're
the tank. No. The tank riders actually have to go on something that is classed as a tank, which is damage value 8.
This is an armored carrier.
Okay.
So you can't. I've already looked into that one. You can't.
Boo.
I was going to do something horrendous. You'll be glad I didn't.
Get down.
There is.
Take the OT-26.
I think the one thing that absolutely has to go, like specifically called out as a T-28 medium tank. So it's called a medium tank, but it has a damage value 8. It has a turret-mounted light howitzer and coaxial MMG, a turret-mounted MMG on the front and left, another turret-mounted MMG in the front and right, and a pintle-mounted AA MMG, which I think is just another MMG. I don't. It doesn't seem to say it has flak or anything like this. And you can also upgrade it to damage value 9, but reduce the tank speed to slow for 10 points. So you basically get 165 points. You get a light howitzer and 4 MMGs. That's armor value 9 and slow. And
that is cool.
I will note that 3 of those MMGs can independently shoot different targets.
In different arcs as well. Like completely different arcs. The Pintle one does give it flak.
Pintle mounted.
Yep. So that's fine. And because the Pintle is on a turret, it by default will get 360 flak and all that other stuff as well.
That's
then you
good.
have Yeah, and the T-28 is great. The actual model is quite large. It's quite a big tank.
It's a battleship.
So,
it's a land battleship.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so that comes with some challenges on the table, typically. But it's very good, and typically only armor 8, unless you pay 10 points to make an armor 9.
The alternative is a T-35, because we've already briefly mentioned the T-34, which is very similar, but it has a light howitzer coaxial MMG turret and 2 different turret-mounted light anti-tank guns and coaxial MMGs.
Yeah.
But it is unreliable. The T-35 is a lot of firepower. If you're a fan of the Grant and the Lee, this is that on steroids for 270 points.
We saw what they did and repeated it in the rear because it was such a good idea.
It is unreliable, so it takes 1 additional pin marker.
Worth it.
That is nuts. That means in 1 turn you could pop. What is that?
Potentially 3.
2 vehicles, like with not a bad chance. You're talking light tanks, and a howitzer to take out something soft skin.
I mean,
that's pretty gross.
You could I was gonna say anything soft skin running around, like multiple Bren carrier armor carriers and stuff. So you just wreck them. You just go, oh, you're taking Bren's spam list? That's cool. Here's my T-35, and you just bam 3 of them. If you hit, obviously, but just like bam, 3 of them dead, and then whatever infantry that is around, you've still got your MMGs next turn after dismounting those guys to then hose them, because they'll all be stuck down. But
actually, after firing those 3 basically tank guns, the 2 light tank guns and the howitzer, you still have 2 MMGs on separate turrets.
Yeah, but all shooting's done simultaneously, right? So
Yeah.
But you're right. You would still have 10 MMG shots to go, and those guys over there, we're going to sprinkle them with lead.
Moving into some of the heavy tanks. Again, we've talked about heavy tanks before. What is worth noting is the KV-1 is armored all round. Which means you don't get the side and rear armor bonuses.
But you can drop that for 70 points and you lose slow as well, so that becomes an interesting choice as well.
So cool. if you didn't want to play essentially the big hulking wreck that can't be destroyed, you can actually reduce that a little bit down. You also can put a light anti-tank gun and coaxial flamethrower in it.
Instead of the medium?
It's a pretty... Armor 10 is like one of those values where people go, but it's so many points, and then you actually play with it on the battlefield and you go, this thing won't die.
Because a medium anti-tank gun, you're not having a good time. You get the KV-85 and IS-1 are folded into the same rules. Nothing really to note here with these heavy tanks, but the turret-mounted rear-facing MMG is a nice little additional bonus. The IS-2 gets an upgraded HE template on its heavy anti-tank gun, which is pretty neat.
It becomes an absolute monster.
And then there's the bone.
It just can't. It's just got a slow load.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Which is for generally for theatre play, not many people will have rivers built into their boards ready to go, but it's essentially take
a floating T-34.
Yeah, take a T-34 and give it a boat, and
that's the
you can actually mount a multiple rocket launcher.
I don't know how you say it.
Yeah.
Well, you think with having some Eastern European heritage, I'd know how to pronounce that word, but I thought
you could take the Brome Crater, or however it is, for 300 points, which gives you a medium anti-tank gun and a friggin' multiple rocket launcher and MMG.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it has to be on water.
Jacob's like, and it's transport. Guess what rides in that transport?
Assault engineers.
Tank
Actually, it's a medium tank. You could put tank riders in it.
Also, you discard the first wound.
The first damage roll.
The first damage is just automatically discarded. Yeah. Why do you think Chris wants to play with it?
It's cool. It's pretty cool.
It is really cool.
It's the sort of thing you build a mission around, and it's like your objective. Yeah. Your objective is to go and kill it.
Yeah.
Now we're moving into tank destroyers. The Ziz 30 is
shocking.
Like an actually like soul destroying vehicle to actually consider that you need to operate. Like, I'm not talking bolt action terms. Like, if you were a dude who was like, yes, this is your vehicle, you'd be like, oh, okay. Like, do you want me to, like, I'll pay for my gravestone now?
Yeah.
It's like a tracked vehicle with just an anti-tank gun on top of it. There's no like armored cab or anything.
Just bolt it down.
The photos are hilarious. Anti-tank gun. Yeah, no thanks. The Su-85 is the German equivalent of a Stug.
Yep.
Or Stu. Su-100, same sort of thing. Case-mounted heavy.
So the
Su-100 is super heavy.
Yeah, the Su-100 is the first weapon that you get within the Russian list going through it like the way we are, where you get that super heavy anti-tank gun.
300 points. Oh, medium tank with a super heavy. That feels pretty bad.
Yeah.
Its profile physically is quite small though, so you can you typically will get cover on any shots coming back at you as well. Then you have one of my favorites.
I quite enjoy this. Mostly because I like super heavy. No, sorry, the Su-100, because I really like super heavy. And so being able to keep it on a medium chassis so the points aren't, Panther level expensive.
Yeah. Panther level, that's your measuring stick. It's like, it's Panther level expensive.
I'm nothing if not predictable.
But then you can swap it for a heavy anti-tank, but the chassis is a heavy tank.
Yeah.
For the same points. For the ISU-122.
Yeah. So what they found is that the super heavy anti-tank gun was essentially, yes, it was really good and over-penetrating, but they didn't have many of them to put in, but they had lots of heavy anti-tank guns, and so they went, well, let's just bulk this up with more armor and just use the excess guns because we need the guns. We don't actually care about the armor. It also gives you the extra HE kit, which is a nice little bonus.
Gotta love good old HE upgrade. That's a big HE upgrade.
Yeah.
It's huge.
D3 HE to 2D6.
Yeah.
3 inches?
Yeah.
That's a huge upgrade.
It's
a heavy
massive.
Anti-tank gun with a 3-inch HE is...
You're basically taking the German 88 profile that everyone freaks out about and putting it in an armor 10 box.
Oh, no thanks.
Tiger ain't that cheap.
Moving right along to the weakest thing in the Soviet book.
Damage value
it's a 20-point horse with a machine gun.
The special rule is just a cart. Jesus Christ.
Its weapon it's not just a weapon that's a machine gun, it's a rear-facing machine gun.
Yeah. So you gotta like Tokyo drift it around.
You know the story. You know the story that you guys told in your Gorch and Tyler episode of the Hawaiian village where the guy straps a weapon to a cart. The Japanese pilot.
Yeah.
He got the idea from the Soviets. This is where he saw it.
The OG Tachanka.
Yeah.
All right, so moving through the rest of the tank destroyers, it's a nice mix of howitzers, anti-tank guns, and armor values, which is pretty good. The Su-76 gets a bit of a mention here.
Yep.
So does the Su-122, actually. I think anything SU in this list, have a close look at it. You're probably going to find something to suit your purposes. KV-2s, which is a heavy howitzer, heavy tank.
Yep.
Which is nice. And then, of course...
Can upgrade to a flamethrower.
Yeah. Of course, we come to the thing that we're really all here for, and that's the Katyusha. Soft skin, multiple rocket launcher.
Just before we go into the Katyusha, that Su-152, ISU-152 entry is worth taking a look at as well, because you get an upgraded big shell, and so it's howitzer penetrations +5.
Ooh!
What?
Whoa!
Yeah,
it's a heavy howitzer with a 5-inch pen.
Heavy howitzer, 5-inch pen, 10+ armor. Slow load, so you can only fire it after something else is fired, or if you issue a snap 2, as per the FAQ. But it's 290 points for regular.
Not bad.
That's cool.
Yeah. I just wanted to call that out before we go to the Katyusha.
Fair point, yeah.
I I missed the big shell. I looked at it, I was like, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Heavy hull is a heavy tank.
You all did, which is why I went, no.
Hold on.
Back to my favorite vehicle, which is the Katyusha.
Yeah, so Stalin's Organ, 80-point soft skin MRL. This is a pretty well documented piece of equipment. You've seen it a lot. I think it's actually kind of interesting because I note that the Soviets don't get an MRL in their artillery slot.
Not in their standard book. That's right.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's another theater book that gives them access to one in a generic reinforced platoon. Okay, there is. So probably a Lend-Lease land mattress.
That's certainly one of the options.
So this is, considering all of the other vehicles that are present in this slot, I think it speaks very much to the way the bolt action works that the Katyusha is still one of the most common ones that comes up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Something about multiple rocket launchers.
You look at all the costs that we've just looked at. Like even that we were just looking at a 290-point tank with a massive potential damage, which is actually probably more consistent than the Katyusha. And then and then we're like, but for 80 points we can get a Katyusha.
A Nebel's 65, so you're paying 15 points for it to be able to move.
Yeah, but the Katyusha is able to move and fire because you ignore fixed. And that's
Wait, what?
That is awesome.
Yeah. You can move and fire, so you hide it out of line of sight, and then you pop around the corner and be like, what's up?
This is something a lot of people, I've actually seen quite a few people miss. If you go to the vehicles section in the rulebook, it specifically says that the weapon special rules don't apply for vehicles, and they have their own special rules.
Fantastic.
So, yes, and here's the thing. An inexperienced Nebel is 65 points. An inexperienced Katyusha is 64 points.
No, I think a regular Nebel is 65.
Right, okay.
But being able to advance, move, all that kind of stuff for 15 points, that's awesome.
And it's very good. It's on a wheeled vehicle, so you actually, it's that dual pivot, it's the longer distance. Like you are paper thin. Anything that blows a stiff breeze in your direction is probably going to kill the driver and everyone in it. But the thing is, if you can hold off and position yourself well enough with the shot, it's got like a 60-inch range on it. So you just need to know what you need to target and stay away from that stuff, and then just drop things down as best as you can. The thing with it is I've played games where it's been amazing. I've also played games where multiple launchers doing multiple launcher things, they also amount to nothing. And so
that's the trade-off.
It's a multiple. It is absolutely the trade-off. And so what my advice would be is don't get one thinking it's going to absolutely change the game immediately, because it may not. That's not how it works. It is high risk, high reward. The benefit is you've only spent 80 points on it, or 64 points if you want to.
Your opponent has to deal with it at 80 points. It's
the fact that they can deal with it in a pistol at point blank is irrelevant.
Even if it doesn't do any damage.
Yeah.
80 points, yep.
So
cheap order dice.
Moving along here, maybe I'm missing something, but the AA Gaz seems really good.
Oh, yep,
it is.
Yep, 60 points soft skin with 4
MMGs. Yep.
Oh Jesus!
It quite happily competes against the Recce Stewarts, or the Dacre Stewart profile. It quite happily. The Dacre Stewart profile will eat it for breakfast when shooting back at the Gaz, but you don't use the Gaz to target tanks. You go on infantry squads and you just leaf blow with them, and you go. It reminds me of.
And you also save 90 points with the Gaz. Dacre Stewart's about 150, give or take.
By two, just by two.
That is way too cheap. It feels anyway.
Well, it does also theoretically only need one rifle shot to die.
And frequently does. If you talk to Chris Ramsey about what they do once he's run them, he's had a couple of games where it was okay, and he's had other games where his opponents just be like, I don't want that thing hurting me, or at least I want to minimize its shooting value, so I'm going to put a pin on it. And that pin comes from a rifle because it's typically longer range, and that rifle has then gone through and killed it anyway.
All right.
next AA vehicle is an American Lend-Lease one. It's the M17 MGMC. This is the chopper, the Quad 50. I think it's same profile. Open top flak, 4 HMGs.
Yeah.
Dan, I've seen you use it. 125 points. Do you rate it?
I would rate it more if those HMGs did get the +1 shot. Like, then for me, it would actually be a very solid choice because you're on the truck body, so you can get within your minimum range, not lose that -1 pen, and just start hammering things away. The armored car component is nice because it means that you can't be just super instant killed. The open top is a little bit of a drawback because it means that you're just going to get those pins mount up anyway. However, it's only 125 points. Now, it competes with a lot of other competitive choices. So I think if I was going to fill the slot, I think I would choose something else, but not because I don't think there's a bit of value here. 12 shots at +1 pen against infantry is actually still quite dangerous. But is it as dangerous as, a 2d6 HE shell from a or a +5 penetration from a heavy howitzer? Like, that's where I think it loses out. It's not because I don't think it isn't good. I think it loses out because the other options are simply better, even if they cost a bit more points.
I think that's a good summary of this whole army book. Is that there's nothing here that's actually bad. It's just that there's a lot of good things. So things seem worse. Moving to the armored cars, pretty standard assortment here. Some can be open top, some can't. Lots of machine guns. I'm not seeing too many anti-tank guns. But there's an armored car flamethrower.
The BA-20.
Very few anti-tank guns. There is the errata additional units, adds a couple of other pieces, but most of them are still covered here. The only one in this list that can't take a flamethrower is actually the BA-64, which was basically a really small car. But basically, their weapon system was a light machine gun. It's not even a medium machine gun.
It's so cute.
I tell you though, I love having it. I love having it in my list. Well, because it's a mobile light machine gun for 65 points, which sounds really bad. I'd normally pay to get rid of open topped, but it has flak, it has recce, and you just run around and harass units with it.
So I got a question about the BA-20. 65 points. You can give it a flamethrower for 45. Does it keep recce?
Yeah. It doesn't.
God, that's really good.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that is good.
The BA-10 as well. There's a variant that comes out, I think, I think it gets a flamethrower on it. I can't recall. And again, it doesn't lose recce. So you can go up at the end of a turn, flamer on something, potentially not run out of fuel, and then when they go to target you in the next turn, you just recce away.
Yeah, and that's a vehicle flamethrower as well, so it's 12
the
inches.
D6 +1, 12 inch. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So OT64, BA-20, there's 2 vehicle mounted flamethrowers for sub 200, sub 300 points. And then you take your implements, and there's all of your 2-inch HE that you're missing. You're taking A19 or ZIS-3, and there's your anti-tank gun that you're missing. Yeah,
there's so much
Easy
versatility.
mode. Yeah. And you haven't, oh my god, you've spent so little points, you still have so many order dice, and you've still got an infantry squad. Anybody who says Soviets are hard to play are lying.
And look, I learned with Soviets, and I learned using regulars, and it really is quite a forgiving. When you build a balance list, it's quite forgiving because your infantry don't automatically just pop and disappear. It still does happen on occasion, but not all the time. And you have so much variety in the vehicle that you want to choose. It's like, well, what do I want to learn with? Well, one of these. Okay, we'll put that on the table. But what do I take out of my list? Nothing. Just everything becomes a little bit worse than what it is, but it won't matter because it's not going to run away as often. And that was how I sort of learned some of the backwards and forwards of how bolt action works. And I went, this army's really good.
It is good.
So it's typically a top table.
Yeah, looking at transports, a lot of standard stuff, half tracks, gazzers, jeeps, artillery tractor, which we've sort of covered before. You can armor it,
Oh, really?
For 35 points.
Yeah, if you want. Yep.
You can have an Armor 7 tractor that can tow anything. Doesn't have transport, so to speak, but it has tow, which is an interesting caveat. But fair enough.
Forces it to be an artillery tractor. That's it.
And then we have the assault couch, which I'm certain is the literal translation of Komsomolet. It's open-topped armored carrier. It's a Soviet Bren.
It's almost like a Soviet Bren carrier. The Bren carrier has way better firepower options. This just carries a light machine gun. The difference, of course, is that, it's not really. You can put tank riders on this, but not as using the tank rider rule, just simply as because it's an armored carrier and you can fit 6 dudes on this. You can just put tank riders on it and be like, this sort of makes sense. Typically, it was used as an artillery tractor with guns and armor.
In my head, if you're doing the whole in your face thing, you chuck some tank riders on a tank, and you have this little thing like a little brother trailing behind with another squad of 6 veteran like assault engineers or something on here, just being like, don't talk to me or my brother again, kind of thing.
The mop up squad.
Yeah.
A squad of replacements. Now's the Erasan, which is what you were talking about before, Dan. It's a armored carrier that can transport ski troops by pulling.
But only 5 of them.
Only 5 of them. Can only travel over snow or flat ice, which treats as normal terrain with a wheeled vehicle.
So if you attempt, and it only has a light machine gun forward facing as its armor. So if you attempt to play this on a board that is not snow or ice, then by default, not only can it not move, but your ski troops that are towing in it can't actually dismount onto them, or they can dismount onto the non-snow surface. But then your transport's stuck there for the whole game. Can't move, just can't do anything. It can fire and sit on an ambush.
So that's static LMG.
Yes. Imagine paying 50 points for an Armor 7 LMG sitting on your backfield. I love it. And then, I guess to round out the army book, we've got the Lend-Lease, which means you can basically use vehicles that are British or American. Gives you a bit of a list, but it's all of your usual suspects that hit Lend-Lease. I think there's probably also been expanded in a few other places.
Yep,
I suspect.
And some of this is up to TO discretion as well. But normally, any vehicle that was produced in approximately thousands of production run copies is what they used as the general guide. There's a chance that those things made it over to the Soviet Union as part of the Lend-Lease program, and therefore you're able to substitute them out. So typically it only works for your armored or truck transport units. So tanks and jeeps, examples exist for M3 Stuarts, substituting for the T-70, Valentine for the T-60, M10 tank destroyer for the Su-85, M3 Lee or Sherman for T-34s, Churchill Matildas for KV-1s, armored car swap outs, anti-aircraft vehicles. You can get the meat chopper as opposed to the quad Maxim, and then your different transport and tows options. They're the examples that they give you. Now, some TOs, and like typically myself, just to keep it simpler, I would normally say that you can only use the ones that are in that list just to keep it simple so everyone's like on the same playing field.
Yeah.
The reality is with the theatre books and the other pieces that have come forward, there are other interactions that you can do with these, which causes no amount of contention sometimes. However, you normally can't take these as veteran. You're normally restricted to only being able to take them as, where it says it in here, I think. Oh no, it's not here. So I could take a veteran Sherman 76, for example. I won't get to use the stabilizers. I'm not American. I don't get that rule. So whether they are simply there and not turned on, or there or turned on, I don't know what I'm doing is irrelevant. The reality is that I'm fairly sure they stripped all that out before they gave it to the Soviets.
Yeah.
Well, considering how many how few armored divisions were actually trained on the use of the gyro stabilizer, and many tore them off or pulled them out because they didn't know what it fucking did, and they thought it was fucking up their aim. Yeah, it's. I would be very surprised if the Russians were suddenly just like, yes, I know what this is.
and we know what to do and how to use it. I think, the FAQ throws it in a bit of contention lately because the Free French are able to use gyro stabilizers under that FAQ. So that may get reversed. We'll see what happens. We might have another Tiger Fear situation where it bounces.
Yes, the single special rule that only applies to veteran vehicles
suddenly applies to the French ones that they pick up. That are,
It was an interesting choice, but I also think it's a lot less contentious than Tiger Fear. I think it just comes up less.
Yeah. It's weird that this isn't like a national rule. The anti-tank team 3-for-1 rule.
Yep. Well, that's not national either. That's just extra selection built into the primary book.
Yeah, I don't think it's a national rule for any of the nations that have a 3-for-1.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, because
it just feels like it.
Yeah.
For the Americans, it's on the MMG team.
Yeah, right.
It's specifically on the MMG team, so you can't take a HMG and 2 MMG teams, for example, or at least in my reading.
No, that's right.
I guess it's designed for future proofing, where you get other things that go into that slot. And this is specifically saying it has to be a dog mine or an anti-tank team or tank hunters and all that.
Yeah.
So I mean that's that rounds a set without going into the theatre selectors, which obviously then restrict what choices you've got in those different ones. There's some of the fun toys. The Soviets do feel like a Swiss Army knife. It's like, right, what tool do I need to deal with this situation or this mission, or how do I want to build a list? You can build any list you want. You want to do high mobility? Sure. You want to do cheap horde? Sure. You want to do expensive stuff? Sure. I actually think between the assault engineers outside of armored vehicles, I think between the assault engineers and the tank rider squads, they rank up there as some of the most expensive units in bolt action.
And understandably.
Yeah.
I think
they're a little good.
I think what the Soviet army book does very well is having specific units for specific jobs, which you were saying at the start of the episode there, Tyler, in terms of, it's like, the American faction is very good at like, you can kind of use anything as a hammer and anything as a wrench, but it's not really designed for it. Whereas the Soviets are like, no, this unit is going to get in your face and it's going to kill stuff, and if you keep it at range, you'll be okay. Which I think is an interesting takeaway for our players in our audience to consider, whether you're playing Soviets or playing against Soviets, is that if you find, yes, the army is a Swiss Army knife, but to me the units are not.
Yes.
So all of the Soviet units have very specific use cases, and so it seems to be a game of playing strengths and weaknesses at a unit level rather than at a side or opponent level.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're coming up against an American opponent, it's kind of the opposite. You have to figure out which of their weaknesses they have on their list construction level, and then swing your strength into that weakness at a sort of a platoon level.
Yeah.
Whereas with the Soviets, it seems to be very much a divide and conquer kind of thing, which I guess makes sense. Can you afford to do that if your opponent brings 20 dice though? Yeah. I think seizing the tempo against the Soviet player is going to be the thing. If you manage to do that, the Soviets should fall apart pretty quickly, at least in my read. I haven't played against many Soviets, but that's just because we do a lot of Allied and Axis stuff. But when I have played against Soviets, I didn't sort of consciously know this going in, and it's just my default way of playing. It's just, no, we're doing this on my clock. But that seems to work really well against a Soviet faction, just because they need to have the right unit in the right place at the right time.
Ironically,
Americans don't.
Yeah, ironically, with the Soviets, like, it's actually very critical to have the right unit in the right place at the right time. Because if you don't, you can build it so that it's a bit more like, so I will typically build a balanced force so I present more like an American strategy where I can sort of just reach out and touch different things. But if you've gone for all SMGs or all this and all that, and your opponent goes, cool story, I'm going to stay 18 inches away from you every turn and just shoot back with my rifles, that unit isn't going to get anywhere unless it chooses to run, and then it's going to get shot point blank, and then you don't have a unit anymore.
So you've got ways to mitigate that with tank riders and body armor and all the other sorts of stuff. But you are right. If you play the Soviet player's weaknesses, which can, as a net result of the way you build the list, as we said, on a unit level, can be quite glaring. For a Soviet player, I guess that means pair your units would be kind of the thing that I would say. Is that if you've got, I mean, tank riders is the obvious one because you've got guys on board who have really short range weapons, and a tank is not equipped with short range weapons. That would be a pretty typical pairing. Another one would be like covering a Soviet engineer advance with even the inexperienced rifle squad. Just give them something else to shoot at. So that squad who wants to shoot at the armored engineers goes, oh, I can stand still and I can shoot those inexperienced guys so they stop shooting at me, or I can stand still, shoot at Soviet engineers, but then they just get a lot closer. So I think, I think if you're playing Soviets, pair your units to cover each other's weaknesses so you can't get divided that way.
Like a wine and a cheese. You gotta pair 'em.
Yes,
so true.
That would be an excellent way to think of Soviets as cheese, and think of, I don't know, your opponent's blood as wine. That's how you play Soviets.
Pair the blood with the... Yeah. No, it's... I think it's a really well-rounded book, honestly. And it basically gives you access to something of everything. So it's a good starter army because you can be like, I'm going to try this. And then if that doesn't work or you want to try something else, you don't have to build a whole new army. You just add like 1 or 2 extra units, until your entire house is filled with all the Soviet options.
Yeah, that was going to be my immediate caveat. Because if you start Soviets, be bankrolled because there are so many different. The infantry unit's probably not so bad because most people are pretty chill about infantry proxies. But when it gets to the vehicles, it's like you have a veritable shopping list, my friend. And it's not it's not like the British vehicles where they're all kind of like slightly different guns on machine
on almost
guns
the same frame.
The Soviets are just like, just stamp something else out of metal and just keep doing that until something sticks.
This didn't quite work, so we're going to try something different and make 10,000 of those, and then we're going to try and do. We still don't know if it's going to work.
What about this shape?
I mean, one of the reasons the T-34 was quite effective was because it was the first tank that really did sloping armor well. It wasn't perfect.
That's a common myth. The T-34 was not the first one that did sloping armor, and it wasn't the first one that did it well. If you look at pretty much any of the tank designs, particularly in the interwar period, most of them had sloping armor. Look at the front armor of a Sherman. It wasn't that the Soviets thought or had figured out sloping armor and knew how to do it. It's just that sloping armor is always a compromise of internal ergonomics and volume to external armor. And all of the other...
They cared less about the internals and then just sharpen the angle.
Correct. All of the other nations went, no, we'll slope the front armor, so Panthers, etc., and went, okay, because we know that that's the one that's going to really matter, and we're going to... That one's not too bad because your driver's sitting down anyway, so it's sloped, it's not too bad. But all of the other ones... Like, you're sitting in the side of a turret trying to operate a gun like this and trying to get to the gunner's sight. A lot of the other nations didn't accept that level of ergonomics and lack of interior space to manipulate their cannon.
But the Soviets didn't see their soldiers as human anyway, so who cares?
Well, it was more so that they needed anything to keep the tank alive. And they could replace the dudes and they could replace the tanks, so they didn't mind so much.
Well, is there any final closing remarks from anyone?
I mean, probably
strong book.
I'm sorry.
Definitely a strong book.
Yeah. Do like facing Soviets. It really is. It's so hard. It is so hard to face. You have no idea what you're going to be facing. You play the same player over and over again. They've got so many options. It's never going to be what you faced last time. I think more people should give it a try.
Yeah.
I'm hoping 2023, red alert across all of Earth, more Soviets. I'd love to see it.
Yeah.
I think as I was saying before, where the army can be quite forgiving for a person looking to either start on the Allied force but doesn't know exactly what they want, or if they're just starting out and they're like, I don't really know if I want to be super aggressive or if I have a very defensive play style. How you play, the Soviets will be able to really build that up for you. So typically I play defensive and a counterpunch in most of my setups. And so my defenses were always quite strong because of those rerolls, and things just didn't run away. And my opponents were just like, I just hit you with like a 2-inch mortar and wiped out half the squad because you didn't choose to go down. What do you mean they stayed? That was just like, well, I rolled and passed the check, and so they're just not going anywhere. It's like, and now I will actually activate that unit and run them away, so your mortar's not ranged in anymore. And I've lost the pin that you put on them, and now I'm going to shoot back. And you get a lot of options that otherwise you wouldn't. So are they easier than any of the forces that we've looked at so far?
Yes.
I kind of think part of that's on the player on how they play, but I do think that because you have so many tools and ways of dealing with things, you have a high level of redundancy naturally within the list.
Yeah.
And so
if you build it that way,
you built it that way,
Yeah.
So it does work. And I think it's easier.
I was also going to say we've been pushing away from the stereotype of not having them as an inexperienced force, but they seem, with the national rules that they have, they're pretty much the best army out there for that, if that's something that you want to do.
Yeah, I think it's a very close tie with Japanese. I would probably wager that the Japanese do it slightly better, but I think it's going to be one of those things where like the difference between the two is going to come down to familiarity with the sort of the list. Like when it really push comes to shove, the difference between the two is going to come down to familiarity with the factions. I think my closing remark would be, we've talked about, if you're not sure what kind of player you are, it's like, if you are somebody who likes units with specific roles and likes to build that synergy across the list, I would very strongly recommend you start with Soviets. For the Allies, maybe Germans for the Axis in that particular case.
I think going off like the inexperience point as like my last kind of point on this, I think not the point, but a really good idea for building a Soviet list is paint in brush strokes. So you start broad and you build it mostly inexperienced, and then you kind of fill in the details of being like, oh yeah, that'll be regular, that'll be veteran kind of thing. Because even their inexperienced are going to be really friggin' annoying to kind of play around because you can have so much of it and they're going to stick most of the time. So yeah, I think they're not suffering from the inexperienced bodies, and they can more than make up for it with their veteran choices.
Yep, definitely.
Well, on that note, thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. I've been Tyler.
I think I'm Jacob.
I've been Gorchin.
And I am Daniel.
And we are HMG. Hope you enjoyed this review of the book. If you have any comments, suggestions, or whatever, chuck it all down below, or like us, rate us on whatever you're listening on or watching on. We very much appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of HMG. See you later.
See you, everyone.
See you, everyone.